At the Old Testament history, and we're looking at family of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and making a foundation of substance. And so we looked at this story last week of how. Were you here last week, Neil? Yeah, I was here last week, wasn't I? But I was a bit late, though. And we saw how it was that Jacob not only got his own blessing from Esau, not only got his own blessing from Isaac, but also he took Esau's blessing. And so Esau then was really upset about this and really angry, and Esau wanted to go and kill him. And so because of this, then Rebekah said to Jacob, you better go, pack your bags, and go and stay with your uncle, my brother Laban. And then when Esau's cooled down, then you can come home again. So Jacob set off, and he went to stay with his uncle. And on the way, he slept, and he had this vision, and he had this amazing dream. And God spoke to him in this dream and said, I am the Lord. It's just part of it. I'll give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. And I'll bring you back to this land. Okay. Anyway, so he goes off to Laban and to Haran, and when he's there, he's a bit thirsty when he arrives, so he goes to the well to have some water to drink, and the well's quite deep, he hasn't got a bucket, and then a beautiful young lady comes along and offers him to draw some water out of the well for him and his camel, and he takes a fancy to her, asks her, who are you? And she says, I'm Rachel, Laban's daughter. And he realizes, wow, you're my cousin. Can I come and stay? And so he goes back home with Rachel. And he goes in and is welcomed, because he's a relative. And he says to Laban, that's Rachel's dad, can I get married to Rachel? And Laban says, yeah, sure, you can get married to her. You just need to work for me for 7 years. And then you can marry her. What do you think about that?
They're cousins, right?
Not first cousins, they're sort of second cousins, yeah. They're cousins, yeah.
7 years, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Especially in the lifespan. In those days, lifespan wasn't very long, so 7 years would be even bigger.
Yeah, so he didn't think, 7 years, man. I'm sure if I go next door, I can marry somebody in 6 months. You see? But in the story, in the Bible it says he loved her so much, he said yes, and because he loved her so much, the 7 years passed like 7 weeks. Yeah? Isn't that romantic?
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, so he worked hard for 7 years, and then then it was the wedding. And so he got married, and of course the bride in the Middle East are covered with all these veils, so you can't actually see what they look like underneath. And so Laban came along, presented his daughter to Jacob. They got married, had a wedding, and then after the wedding, then they went to their room, and the lights were out and climbed into bed. Anyway, the next morning, Jacob woke up and he looked over to see his beautiful wife, and he saw, instead of Rachel, he saw her older sister Leah, who had weak eyes, in other words, wasn't as pretty. And he felt really betrayed. 7 years he worked to get married to Rachel, and he finds that his uncle's married him off to the Rachel's older sister. And so he goes round to Laban and says, "What's the meaning of this? Why did you deceive me? Why did you break this promise?" And Laban said, "Well, it's okay. As part of the tradition in our country, we don't marry the younger daughter until the older daughter's married. But don't worry. Just work for me for another 7 years, and you can marry Rachel as well." So how do you think Jacob felt then? What do you think was going on in his head?
Probably thinking to himself,
What have I
now
done?
I know what Esau feels anyway.
Yeah, and he started to understand why
Esau wants to give him.
why his older brother was so upset and angry with him. What goes around comes around. He felt deceived. Now he understood what it was like to be tricked and deceived. And he must have thought, no wonder Esau felt so bad about what I did to him. No wonder he got so angry. And so Jacob then had a choice. What was he going to do? Was he going to go and kill Laban? Or was he going to forgive Laban? And so what he did then is he forgave Laban for what he'd done. And he went through a lot of suffering then in his relationship with Laban, who tricked him over and over and over and over and over again. But instead of getting bitter and resentful, he just digested it. And through this, he became a person, through the suffering he went through, he became a person of very deep character. And so in that sense, it became a condition of indemnity. Because of the suffering he went through, he didn't become resentful at anything, but he felt maybe this is, what I deserve because of the way I treated my older brother. So he ended up there for 21 years, and during this time, he restored the 3 blessings. So he became a person of character through going through all this suffering, became a person of great wisdom and great depth of heart, and he got married, had 2 wives, and so he established a family with 11 children, and later on he had another one, another 2.
Yes, that's it.
That's
Then
right.
they are going to Patina.
That's right, yeah. 12 boys and 1 girl.
One girl, yeah.
Must have driven the mothers round the bend.
I think that's why Jesus has 13 disciples too as well.
That's right, he had a whole football team. Jacob United football team. Anyway, so after 14 years then, he's got the 2 wives, and he says to his uncle, I've done what I need you to do now, I think I'll go home. Then Laban says, it's okay, just work for me for another 7 years, then I'll reward you richly, and you'll leave here and go home a really rich man. And so Jacob says, all right, and so they come to some kind of deal. He looks after all the sheep, and the deal is that he'll have one particular kind of sheep, and then Laban will have another particular kind of sheep. So after the deal's been struck, then Laban tells his sons to go and get all the sheep that he promised to Laban and take them to another valley. And so when Laban goes back to the flock of sheep, he sees all the ones which he'd been promised have all been removed. Anyway, so over the next 7 years, he engages in a bit of breeding, and he breeds the sheep so they all turn into the kind of sheep that he had been promised. And over these 7 years, Laban tricked Jacob out of his wages 10 times. 10 times he said, right, at the end of this year, I'll pay you this amount. And at the end of the year, he found all kinds of reasons why he wasn't going to pay Jacob the full amount or something. So 10 times he's tricked out of his wages. And during this time, he never complained, just took it, absorbed it, digested it. And, so in that sense, he was going up in character and soul, and Laban was, declining. He became a much greater person than Laban. Anyway, after 21 years, he got a dream, and God told him to go home, back to see his dad, Isaac. And so Jacob then, he packs his bags, takes all his wives, his children, and all his wealth and everything, and he sets off to go back home. And of course, he feels he has to go and make things up with Esau. So he sends messengers, and the messengers to his brother Esau, and says, I have sent to tell my lord, in order that I may find favor in your sight. So what do you think Jacob was expecting? Been away from home for 21 years. What kind of a reception do you think he was going to get? What kind of reception do you think he thought he was going to get?
Maybe he thought to himself, 21 years. Maybe Esau might have melted now, and he'll be nicer to me, or whatever.
Yeah, he probably thought, I've been away 21 years. They're going to put on a party, put on the welcome home party, get out the banners, the lights. Jacob's coming home. That's what he expected. As it says here, I've sent to tell my Lord in order that I might find favor in your sight. In other words, so that you can be happy and rejoicing to see me and put on the party. Yeah, call all my old friends round. That's what he expected. Okay, so he sent his messengers to get everything ready for the party. And the messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he's coming to meet you, and 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. Yeah? So he got a real shock. 400 men, you know.
Sorry.
Okay? So you can see there, you know, Jacob was afraid. What was he afraid of?
The 400 men.
He's afraid he might, you know, he's afraid there might be a fight, and he's afraid he might get killed, or maybe he might kill his brother. Yes, you know, you can't tell really how the fight's going to turn out. So he's afraid and distressed. Yeah. So he obviously thought, wow, he obviously hasn't forgiven me for what I did to him 21 years ago. He's obviously, for 21 years, he's been bearing a grudge. For 21 years, this grudge has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now he hears Jacob is coming. Now he hears I'm coming home. He thinks, now I can go and get my own back. Yes? So what's Jacob's choices here?
Face him or run away?
Yes. He can go and confront his brother and face this situation, or he can think, well, not going there, he doesn't want to see me, well, okay, I won't go and see him. I'll just go straight home to see Isaac. So why does he go? So he actually decides to go and meet his brother. Why do you think he does that?
Unfinished business.
Yeah, unfinished business. He feels he has to go back. He realizes why Esau's so upset. Because he's tricked. He realizes he has to go and make it up with Esau. He realizes Esau feels naturally wronged. Jacob realized he made a mistake, taking Esau's blessing. And he realized he needs to go and make it up with Esau. He feels this sort of moral obligation to go and confront Esau and to do whatever he can to resolve and restore the situation. Yeah, and it's not running away from it, but just to face up to it and go and put things right. And it takes a lot of courage to do that, doesn't it? At the risk of his life, he was willing to do that. But he had to come up with what Baldrick would call a cunning plan. Yes? He doesn't want to get killed. If Jacob gets killed, that's the end, it's finished. He has to restore the mistake that he made. Yeah? So what he does, he divides all his possessions into two and sends half of them as gifts to Esau. And along with all the sheep comes a shepherd, and this is the message that the shepherd gives to Esau: these belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau, and moreover he's behind us. So when Esau saw all these sheep coming towards him and was told that this was a gift from Jacob, what do you think Esau thought about it? What impression do you think it would have made on Esau?
I think it happens that we have to imagine that maybe if my brother is as cunning as he used to be.
Yeah, he thought, well, maybe, exactly, he would have started to change his impression. You know, Esau obviously had a certain kind of concept or idea of what Jacob was like. Jacob, 21 years before, was this really tricky person who tricked him out of his birthright and stolen his blessing. That was his picture, his concept, his image of what Jacob was like. Jacob had to change that concept. He had to try and change Esau's concept of him. And so he did something which the old Jacob never would have done. Send gifts along. And of course Esau thought, not like my old tricky younger brother, maybe he's changed. You know, kind of started to sort of waver, and maybe I'll give him give him a chance, see what's going to be a bit more open-minded. And so the reason why Jacob did this, he said, I may appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterwards I shall see his face, and perhaps he will accept me. So here, very important, he says, I may appease him. Why does Jacob feel he needs to appease Esau? Because he realized he did something wrong. By taking Esau's blessing, he offended and upset his brother. He needs to make it up to him. And he's thinking, by giving these presents, maybe this is the way in which I can start to make things up to him, and then maybe after that I can see his face, and perhaps he will accept me. So Jacob then wants to be accepted by his older brother. Yes? He feels it's important for him to restore this relationship with his older brother, to be accepted by his older brother. Anyway, then that night comes and Jacob, goes to bed up by the ford of Jabbok. So Jabbok is a sort of river which flows into the River Jordan, and the ford is the crossing point. Nothing to do with Ford cars. And I'm surprised the Ford Motor Company never thought of calling one of their cars a Jabbok.
Jalopy, maybe.
Sorry?
A jalopy sounds similar.
Yeah, Jabbok. Jabberwocky. Remember that? Did you learn the poem, Jabberwocky?
Yeah, it was a movie.
Sorry?
It was a Monty Python movie.
That's right, yeah. Edward Lear, I think, wasn't it? Anyway. Okay. Anyway, so it says in the Bible, a man came to fight with him, and this is traditionally understood as an angel came to fight with him. And he struggled all through the night with this angel, and finally when the sun was starting to rise, the angel wanted to go, but Jacob hung on to the angel and wouldn't let him go and said, before you go, you have to bless me. And then, he asked him what his name was, he wouldn't tell him, he said, you have to bless me. And the angel said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. In other words, you persevered, you haven't given up. Even wrestling with God, you wouldn't let go, you wouldn't give up. So what's that all about then, this struggling with the angel?
I think it comes to do with the fall, basically. Because Adam and Eve, in the beginning, given to the desire of the archangel. So here was Jacob here, and then we find that position is basically...
Okay. That's one element of it. He's having dominion over the angel, which, yes, restoring that. But what else is going on here? Before he met Esau, how did he feel? When he heard Esau was coming to meet him, how did he feel?
Afraid.
He felt afraid.
Yes.
So you can imagine he had to wrestle with his fears.
Yes.
You feel afraid, you want to run away.